Hey. What's
Hey,
going
there we
on?
go.
I have my friend and mentor, Blaine Bartlett, learnblainbartlett.com/LMM leadership. I got to tell you, Blaine, before we get started with Tom Walker, I hear such great things about your mentorship program. You know, a lot of kids that I are in either groups or one-on-one or watch, come to the free trainings on Friday. They're joining your mentorship group and they love it. So I don't know what you're doing over there, but great reviews.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I'm having a ball with it, and I think the folks in there are getting quite a bit of value. So we'll just keep trudging along with it. They have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun with it.
Just like this show, we're gonna have a lot of fun here because we got another Buckeye coming in here. You didn't know, but Columbus, Ohio, with my friend Kwame, my friend Tom Walker, Brett Caulfield, the Schottensteins. I tell you, man, they're gonna rival Silicon Valley soon, right there from Columbus. And obviously, Ohio State's a much better institution than Stanford, anyway. So,
hey, you're gonna rival the Oregon Ducks here. Don't get me started.
I know now I'm partial to them because of Justin Herbert, but Tom is the president and CEO of Rev1, one of the new startup studios investment funds there in Columbus, and we got a lot of great insight to get into. Tom, thanks for joining us on Office Hours.
Hey, David, Blaine, my pleasure. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Dave. Yeah. No.
Sorry, I was going to say, I'm going to get right into it because, there's so much money out there right now that even Columbus, Ohio has it. So I want to get into what the I love that.
Great intro.
I'll wait all day to say that. I'm a huge Buckeye. But you carry so many valuable lessons for entrepreneurs and, doing a little bit of due diligence. I'd love for you to share some of your top lessons that you've learned for startup and entrepreneurs, since over 50% of our entire workforce is basically freelancers and entrepreneurs now. I think it'd be great if we could empower them with some of your experience and lessons that you've learned.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me here today. And it's a pleasure to see both of you, and thanks for the intro on Columbus, so we always appreciate that. So, and you'll ask about my accent. My accent is not from Columbus. I'm actually from the Oklahoma, Texas area, but call Columbus home. Glad to be there. A lot of insights. I've been in this industry now for nearly 30 years and just love supporting entrepreneurs, really passionate people that have big, bold ideas. My first piece of advice for an entrepreneur is to always build a business plan. I've never been one of those that, you fund an idea that's on the back of a napkin, and I have to go out and raise money. And whenever I do that, I write down all my ideas, put it in a plan, and have some structured thoughts and know that it's a living document, but give something that you can have that give and take. And it's just a great way to really, start off a relationship with a potential investor.
What I like about that, and I'm going to just, mea culpa here. I'm a fan of napkins.
Oh boy.
And that being said, when you're looking to source money for a startup, you have to match the money request to the milestones or the KPIs that you're actually wanting to mark out here. When in the decks that you get, or I'm scattering around here a little bit because I'm very intrigued with the use of the word studio in your setup here, a investor startup studio, because for me a studio speaks to art, and entrepreneurship is actually less of a science and more of an art. The science part is the business plan, and you got the blocking and tackling in there that goes into place. How do you work with entrepreneurs as an art form? As you're getting them set up.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and for us, the studio is really a way to bring together a whole suite of services. So some people may view us as a venture capital fund. I don't view us that way. We do have a source of capital to help entrepreneurs, but we also have, I have 20 plus people on the team that they focus on helping the entrepreneur build out their talent team. So whether it's from recruitment or building a plan to go from 2 founders to 30, in a very short period of time. We help them access diverse talent, because today's day and age, you need to build a company that looks like today. And so let's add diverse talent, be inclusive. Though we know those teams have more success than non-diverse teams. And so we help them through all that aspect. We help them with connections. You need a first customer. We have a team that can go out and help you get your first customer and really refine the product and those kinds of things. And then the last piece in our studio approach is we have space. So we like to have companies come spend time with us. Now, that meant something a lot different when we weren't officing in our spare bedroom here. But this day shall pass, and we'll be in our facility again and have companies be right there next to us.
As you provide all the studio services necessary to build and scale a business and be financially prudent in funding it as well, I would take out of context what Blaine said, because I don't mind seeing a napkin if the request of the napkin is appropriate. And you're right. And I think too many people watch, Shark Tank and even my elevator pitch and Dragon's Den. And those are, literally napkin funding film that is not realistic and for what they're asking for. And it's great TV, which I really enjoy, by the way, which is why it inspired me to do 2-minute drill where I could just stick to, hey, let me teach you how to pitch because pitching is real. Funding is not on TV, and it's hard to do when you're on TV. But so to move it from the napkin to an executive summary to the business plan, which then becomes a living document, to then a pitch deck, which is a whole nother thing on top of a business plan. Which stage do you guys start the studio for, and in which aspects do you help? Do you help with the business plan? Do you help with the deck? Do you make introductions for funding? Where are all the capabilities of the studio for someone in that entire lifespan?
So I've always spent my career at the earliest stage. So we've built our program around true concept deals. You can just have a wild idea. And we'll go up to, industry terminology, Series A, when companies are starting to introduce the product in market and they have some revenue based on their business model. But we'll go really early, and we have services. As an example, we call it a customer learning lab. One of the big things in our model is we want you to build your plan around the customer. Be very market focused, and we have a learning lab that teaches entrepreneurs at the rawest early stage to get out, test their idea with customers in mind, so that when you get to that executive summary and you start thinking about your first pitch, it's all built with the customer in mind, as opposed to, I'm going to build this and the customers are going to come. As we all know, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So then there's that migratory path, by the time you get to the pitch deck, and David and I talked about this on the show last week, what do you listen to as opposed to listen for? And in my experience, when a pitch deck gets put together, it's, on my side of the table here, putting the deck together, I know what I want to pay attention to, but it may not be what the investor's paying attention to. So how do you work with your guys? I'd say guys very generically here. How do you work with them so that they can begin to listen for what the investor's looking for, so that they can actually call an audible in the middle of the pitch if they seem to be missing the mark?
That's terrific insight. We really try and get them to do their homework first. So you need to build that summary based on the kind of capital you need, match that capital to who you're going to pitch. So if I'm going to pitch you, Blaine, and I know you're an angel investor, you may have a different insight and you're looking for something different right now from a stage like, David mentioned Kwame and Drive Capital, which will be, maybe a little bit down the road, so build the plan for your audience and know who you're talking to, so that, it's productive time and that you have key milestones that, I know Blaine wants to know, hey, when are you going to have first revenue, or something like that. And so really work with them to really match your audience with the key milestones that you're going to develop.
When you're working with companies at the ideation state, it's extremely difficult because I don't know any successful business that looks the same as when it was pitched to me. And my most successful venture that I've invested in was one that I just invested in for the marketing alignment that I had with the investment, to say that I was involved in esports with, Meta World Peace and Markets Colston, and I invested as a franchise owner, which then turned into an entire esports platform and $500 million arena. And, leave it to me to take the only investment I ever came home and told my wife, hey, I think we're going to lose the money, but this is a really good marketing idea. Instead of, honey, I just invested in and will never work again. And those usually bankrupt me. But at the ideation stage, I see a lot of deals like you. It's extremely difficult for me to pick a deal that early. And I'm always amazed by people like you, Tom, that are capable of seeing something in an idea. So number one, what do you look for in the idea? And then how important is the entrepreneur versus the actual idea?
Well, you just answered it. We're investing in people first, and the idea or the product is really second. And at that ideation stage, there's a lot of learning, so part of this is teaching. And so we help the entrepreneur kind of split their idea into 5 key elements. And one is that product. The second is the market. And then we help them answer the third, which is, can you make a business out of that product market combination? And if that looks positive, then we dig into the team. Is David the right person to take this? Or, can David at least take it to the next stage? Can he take it to the seed stage or something of that nature? And then we can put more people around him. And then the final piece that we help them understand is the financial aspect of the business. Is it feasible? Is what they're doing feasible? If they need 20 million to just get the idea, out of the garage, that may not be, terribly feasible in a region like us at a seed stage, just as an example. Or if it's, $1 million to really get it up and running, we can pull that kind of money together and probably help them. But from the outset, it's the person. Is it someone that's coachable? Do they want to work with you? And do they have the wherewithal to really move it forward?
That's awesome.
I love it. Where can people find out more about what you're up to? Because you've got 100 million under management in 5 different funds. So there's probably going to be a landing place for somebody. How can they find you?
Well, Rev1Ventures.com. And we're everything's on there, and we have a great toolkit to actually help you build some of these materials that the 3 of us have been talking about today. And all of our contact information is there as well.
And Tom, who do you root for when the Buckeyes play Oklahoma?
Oh boy, I'm an Oklahoma grad.
I know.
so it is terrible, but when the Buckeyes went to Oklahoma, I rooted for Oklahoma, and the Buckeyes won. And when they came to Columbus, I rooted for the Buckeyes, and Oklahoma won. So I've got to come up with a different method.
Well, you tell me who you're rooting for, and I'll bet against that and make some money at least. So we'll be good. Thank you so much.
That sounds like a good plan.
Take care. Check him out. Rev1 Ventures, Tom Walker. He's a mensch. He's a great venture capitalist, and that's what makes America tick. Without people like Tom Walker, we would not have the extraordinary expansion that we have worldwide. And it takes, a lot for me. I know there are lottery tickets and how they turn out. All you need is one to pay for that 100 million within the 5 funds even. But I would have no hair left. I don't know how he does it. So that's incredible.
Boy, I know. And it is early stage. That's tough. That's the toughest piece to play with.
Yeah, and I mean, I love entrepreneurs, and I don't have the patience, to get them there, and I'd rather work with them without the funding side of it. So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
we're going back. We're going back to economics today. So our author of Elevated Economics, the man of steel himself, Richard Steele. He forgot his cape and he wore his tie instead. It's so nice to see people, Blaine coming from the old school traditional guys. Isn't it nice to see someone look like this for once?
Yeah. Kind of, whoa.
I'm glad I'm getting all this credit just for putting on a tie. That's good work.
It's amazing, man. I got more guys in hoodies coming on my programs than anything else. And, they may wear hoodies, but I think they have like 10 times the amount of money that I have. It's crazy.
Exactly.
I mean, Gary Vee wears like a t-shirt every time I see him. I'm like, dude, you can afford a suit and tie. No, I'm just kidding. He would never, ever. Anyway, Richard Steele is the CEO of Parsec Ventures and author of, I said, Elevated Economics. And wanted to get to the book actually to start, Richard, because I'm really interested. Blaine and I wrote a book called Compassionate Capitalism that I think has a lot of synergies to the idea of the elevated economics. And what was your inspiration for writing the book?
Yeah, thanks. Look, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was great to hear you guys chatting with Tom just for the last half hour or so. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, getting to the book, I spend a lot of my time talking with business leaders and folks in government about how business and society are changing. And we're always trying to look around the next corner, whether it's with portfolio companies or folks in various networks that are running even large businesses. And there was a point last summer. I was rafting in the Colorado River. We came to this part where the Colorado River and the Roaring Fork River meet. And the point at which two rivers meet is called a confluence, right? But that term confluence is only used if the rivers are rivers of similar size. Otherwise, one's a tributary. So, and at the same time in society, we're seeing this confluence of events, right? Climate change coming to a real head, racial injustice, same thing, diversity and inclusion issues, regulation, new accounting standards, which, it always gets real when the accountants get involved. Yeah. And then new investing and consumption habits of the next generation. And sort of all this with the backdrop of, accessibility of information for everybody, right? We're all walking around carrying a smartphone in our pockets. And this confluence of all these really similar sized events was happening all around the country, all around the world at sort of the same time. And so the folks that I talk to, as I mentioned before, business leaders, CEOs, folks in government, and I've run, just to give your audience some background, I've run public companies and private companies, and I advised the Biden campaign on economic policy for about the last 18 months. So I'm talking to all these people, and we're trying to sort of see what's next and look ahead and talk about the future. And I thought, what, it's time to really delve into these ideas. And so the book is not, it's not an opinion piece. It's based on facts and numbers and trend lines and things like that. And it was sort of a summation of a lot of discussions that I've been having, backed up with some research and interviews. Well,
I'm on the board of the World Business Academy, and the Academy was one of the founding catalysts for the Just Capital movement. And elevated economics comes into play because you're talking about the shift in GATT standards. The accountants are starting to measure things differently, and a large part of that has to do with what is a just company? How do we measure a just company? Not one that has shareholders as their primary stakeholder group, but the whole social responsibility conversation. All of these sorts of things come into play. I'm struck by elevated economics. There's just a notion there that economics as the dismal science actually can be elevated in our discourse, where it can actually elevate consciousness and the way we approach doing business. And that's just a kind of a riff, and I'm going to throw that back into your lap. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I think what you said got codified on 8/19 of 19, right? August 19th of 2019 is when the Business Roundtable issued their new statement on the purpose of a corporation, and they listed 5 things. So prior to that, Shareholder primacy was the theory. Milton Friedman and his theory of shareholder primacy was the standing theory, returning value to shareholders at all costs. And this new statement on the purpose of a corporation put out by the Business Roundtable, which, by the way, is just for everybody who's here, the CEOs of all the largest companies in America, right? So Doug McMillon of Walmart and Tim Cook of Apple and the CEOs of Vista Equity Partners and BlackRock and Amazon. I mean, the list goes on and on, GM, et cetera. And so what they said is that the purpose of a corporation is to do 5 things. Number 1, deliver value to customers. Okay, fair enough. Number 2, invest in their employees, including diversity and inclusion, dignity and respect, skills training, et cetera. The third thing was dealing fairly and ethically with their suppliers. The fourth was supporting the communities in which they operate. And the last on the 5 of the 5 sort of bullet points or ideas about the new statement of the purpose of business was to generate value for shareholders. But they were specific to delineate that as long-term value for shareholders. So that was pretty much a watershed day, like I said, sort of codifying what you just said there.
Yeah.
Richard, you have economic, social, and governance, your ESG that you talk about. But one of the things, that I've learned is that we get excited in the economic sphere about things that will never happen. And let me give you an example, because of the emotional aspect of it. Fossil fuel. I sat with Lee Steinberg and talked about Milton Friedman, right? He talked about our incredible environmental issues and the problem with the depletion of fossil fuels, which because of entrepreneurs and technology really is not an issue. In fact, it may be a counter issue of what are we going to do with the glut of fossil fuels that will be existing because the technology is going to save so much of this resource or whatever it is. But in your book, you talk about inaction. And it's a study that I think is very important for the next generation of allowance and inaction, of being able to utilize, because we haven't caught up to our technology. For the first time, I believe we should be giving people, science fiction books and other things to allow their imaginations to catch up to what we're capable of doing with the technology that we have, so that we can solve some of these major confluences, as you say, with a different realm of thinking, which only comes from the imagination. So how does the inaction, in your economic opinion, as a superpower, kind of reconcile with the action that we're taking?
Sure. Interesting question. So I would say that, first of all, failure of imagination is a dangerous thing. For various reasons. That quote is usually attributed to the folks who had to deal with the Twin Towers and 9/11, right? They never imagined, when constructing the buildings, that an attack of that magnitude or that type would take place. And the same thing in the sort of security apparatus of the United States. Failure of imagination. Now, to get it a bit lighter and take it out of the dark place, I would say that failure of imagination on the technological side, or on the ways that society can change, would also be detrimental. But I think we're coming out of that for sure. So a couple things. So you mentioned ESG investing, so environmental, social, and governance. That part of the investing world is really taking off, right? There are over 2,700 ESG themed funds as of earlier this year. And that's a huge increase from just years past. When we talk about inaction and the consequences of inaction, customers have changed, investors have changed. And if you look at some consequences of inaction going back just a little while ago, let's say going back to last year, in response to climate inaction by their firms, folks at Amazon formed a group called, workers at Amazon formed a group called Amazon Employees for Climate Justice. They staged a walkout. So the staffers who walked out of HQ in Seattle that day were joined by employees of Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook. And then fast forward a couple months, Amazon then pledged $2 billion to the climate crisis. just a few months ago, Unilever pledged to cut fossil fuels from their detergents. And to do so is going to cost them €1 billion to do that, right? So those are real world implications. So you've got employee activism, you've got consumers changing, you've got employee activism as well. Another example of employee activism for firms that are not acting is Wayfair, right? Their employees refused to go to work because they didn't want their company to sell mattresses to the government, who was planning on using them at their detention center at the border, the whole kids in cages thing. You had Google employees last year refusing to work on projects for the DoD. So these are real world consequences of a changing workforce, changing generation, and really changing attitudes towards both investing and consumption habits, and obviously where people work and what they're working on.
Well, one of the things in the time that we have left with you here, Richard, I'd like you to speak to what you see as emerging trends. I mean, this confluence, there's a lot of perturbation in confluence. And in that perturbation, if you're really looking at it, you can begin to see some trend lines, things beginning to trail out and moving towards that. What are some of the key trends that you might see emerging in, say, the next 5 years? I don't want to go out much further than that because it's going to change real quickly here, but yeah.
Sure. So, and I have a bad habit of giving long answers to short questions, so I'll try and be brief. So as far as trends, so if you look right now at funds that are professionally managed, so money that's professionally managed in the United States, the percentage of professionally managed assets in the U.S. that are projected to have an ESG mandate, meaning an investor will talk to their financial advisor and say, hey, I want to only invest in companies that have decent practices across environmental governance and sustainability in those areas. And I don't want to invest in other companies, right? So whether it's environmental, social, or governance, I want to make sure that my dollars that I invest are being invested in companies that sort of espouse my values. So as a percentage, the percentage of professionally managed assets in the U.S. that are projected to have that ESG mandate that we just talked about, 50% in 5 years. 50% of all managed assets in the U.S. It's incredible, right? There's $17.1 trillion right now that are invested in sustainable investments. And by the way, there's no trade-off anymore. I always get this question like, oh, and this is a bunch of tree hugger nonsense. There's no trade-off. We've all seen the studies, Barron's, in MarketWatch, et cetera. So I'll stop there.
It's so amazing. I'm thinking to myself how blessed, regardless of your politics, that we have advisors like you to our presidents. I know Sharon Lechter is one of my friends who advised many presidents. I've been asked to sit with Dave McCourt on a small business advisory to the president, independent, which, in reference to this president, regardless of your politics, I love the fact that he allows independent advisors that understand and have extreme knowledge like you do of this space, because I think we need, very objective opinions based off of elevated economics, and how I think it's a reconciliation besides a confluence of ideas. It's a reconciliation of ideas that you can be compassionate and capitalistic. You can be able to solve problems and make money at the same time. And we're learning that more and more. And I think the future generation knows it even better than, guys that will analogize to Marshall Thurber with perturbation. And I haven't heard that in a long time, so I'm feeling really old. So thank you, Blaine, for making me feel old again. I appreciate you and your intellect as well. But Richard, I know you're elevatedeconomics.org. Is that where people can find the book?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's elevatedeconomics.org. One last point too. You talked about the next generation. There's a thing called the Great Wealth Migration, the Great Wealth Transfer coming. It's $68 trillion that's being transferred from baby boomers and older generations to the next generation. 80% of them invest completely differently than their parents did. So think about that, $68 trillion.
Well,
Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah, I was going to say real money means nothing, because $67 million was traded today on a piece of NFT art. So definitely we're looking at different investment. And thank goodness I have a whole bunch of Warren Moon football cards that are worth a ton. And See, it's good business partner to have. Thank you so much, Richard. We appreciate you so much.
Richard, love. I'm going to get the book. I'm very intrigued with what you're up to with this. Thank you.
I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're awesome. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. You can dress down next time, Richard. All right. I'm going to move us in a whole different direction. I know we've been on the economic roadmap here. We have a friend of the family here coming in, Dr. Anya Temer. She is the architect of Total Holistic Centers and the medical director there as well. Something that you and I, of course, are large supporters of the holistic approach to life beyond medicine. And so we wanted to have you on, Doctor. Give us a little bit of background about the Total Holistic Center, and then we'd be happy to answer a question for you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be on. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of yours. Total Holistic Center is something that I came up with when I finished my medical education, my regular medical education as a family medicine doctor. And then I looked around in the system, and unfortunately, I was a little bit disappointed to see that people were not really truly getting healthy. People were coming back over and over again with the same issues and sometimes worse. And the bag of medications that they had was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I didn't like that. It didn't sit well with me. I wanted to really see people get out of bed and feel better and feel good in their body, able to move on with their life, their purpose in life, their family, their career, their passion. So I started looking into complementary approaches, and that's how Total Holistic Center was born. And one of the biggest things that I see, this is why I wanted to ask you that question, is, we're all aware that mindset is a huge part of our health, it's a huge part of our habits, our rituals, things that we do on a daily basis. And the way that we're different from any other clinic is that we work kind of as coaches as well. We coach people step by step of how to change their daily rituals, their habits, but most importantly, this right here. But my big thing that's kind of like a wall that I'm seeing is getting through to people and making them realize that just taking a pill and a quick fix is not the way out. And it takes more work to get to the place of health with all these changes. How to motivate people to really see the value in making those mindset changes. That's where I struggle the most.
And I think everyone struggles with the consistent, persistent behavior issue, regardless of what it is. And to understand that is to accept that. And so if we accept it as mentors and coaches being, we're going to bring the best out of you, and a mentor being someone that will give the best of them to you. I have found it's so interesting, especially with holistic medicine, is if we set and frame the person where they're at as being whole. So, one of the interesting things is that if we can get them to buy into, you already are healthy, you are already wealthy, you are already happy. These are three areas that I deal with all the time with mindset. And help me out. Let's figure out what's interfering with what you already are. Help me out, because if you take that shift in the paradigm of understanding, then you won't want to go on a fad diet. You won't want to take a pill, because in essence, you're contributing to the problem, because we can show you how fad diets interfere with what you already have, how taking a pill interferes with what you already are, and what is walking through and with you at all times, this higher, greater source of power, light, and love. And so I think statistically, one, understanding motivation is a short-term fix for everyone, that motivation only, and because fear motivates you, and there's no greater soul sucker or interference than fear in our lives. So we really want to inspire someone, and to inspire them, we have to acknowledge, remember, recollect what we're connected to and through. And I think the first mindset tip in your position is to get the buy-in that they already are what they want. And then you're able to address what's interfering with it. So when they come up with what is a common day Western solution to a problem, the quick fix, the fast drive-through, the short-term instant gratification solution, that when I can get people to understand why do we want to contribute to what's already interfering with what you already have? We can get better buy-in and better inspiration and motivation, and we get more statistical success in the enjoyment of the consistent, persistent behavior because we've empowered them with what truly is already theirs. So that's the technique that I utilize to effectuate that. And I think getting buy-in for that's a lot easier than what you resist persist. That pill's not going to do it for you, or whatever you may have to confront in the short-term instant gratification world that we live in. Blaine?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. I'm going to pick up on this. It's already in here. It just needs to be brought out. I'm on the teaching faculty of the American Association for Physician Leadership. And I've spent a lot of time in hospital systems with docs, and they all, I mean, literally, this is universal. They all have a concern about their patients not doing what they commit to do, whether it's taking the med or changing the lifestyle, or you just kind of name it. And it has to do with the word commitment. We ask people to commit to something. And by definition, that to that we're asking them to commit to is outside of themselves. I want you to commit to a change in lifestyle. Well, that change in lifestyle doesn't live in me, it lives outside of me. And as a consequence of that, ownership is suspect. And because ownership is suspect, it's now as the doc, it's now your objective, your goal, it's not mine. And I'll go along to get along for a point in time, but when it starts to get uncomfortable, I'm going to relapse and go back to my old way of being. And one of the things that I've found that works with this is changing how people, and this is a mindset, changing how people think about commitment. Commitment is actually a gestational process. And instead of being committed to something, I changed the language. I am a commitment. And this goes to the internal piece that you're speaking about, Dave. If I am a commitment to good health, if I am a commitment, that's an identity piece. And through repetition, that I amness begins to be gestated. It begins to take root. And at some point in time, it begins to birth as a healthy lifestyle. It begins to birth as a healthy diet. So thinking of commitment as a gestational process, not as an act I take, but as a state of beingness that I begin to cultivate and curate. That is something that you can play with. It gets to be really interesting when people begin to actually get their arms around it. 95% of behavior is unconscious. I've got a conscious idea about what I'm going to change my diet. That's 5%. And then that 95% kicks in and we run off the rails. So, and that's a function of identity. The mindset and identity kind of function in the same guise in this sense here. So what is commitment? Well, commitment is a gestation. You're giving birth to a new way of being, and it starts in here. It's not out there. You want to plant the seed in here.
I love it. Well, hopefully that was helpful for you, Doctor. And we certainly appreciate all that you're doing. And hopefully these two ideas will help shed more commitment into your efforts of teaching and inspiring others.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We all have everything within us that we need, and have to remove what's not supposed to be there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And everybody can find totalholisticcenter.com. Dr. Anya Temer, thank you so much for joining us. Awesome. All right, takeaway for the day. I got my famous boys waiting for me for a quick training session. What do you got for me, Blaine?
There you go. I'm going to just riff on the word that I just used here, gestation. I hadn't even thought about that until we were talking with her. But, if we go all the way back to the first conversation with Tom, entrepreneur is gestating an idea, gestating an organization, gestating a service or product into life. Richard, the elevated economics, we're bringing birth to a new way of being. And it's about beingness. It's not about doingness. It's about how do I, as an entrepreneur, what's the identity that I'm living from? And that's the whole question of leadership. Leadership is a beingness process. And you're continuously gestating co-created, coordinated movement. I mean, it's a shameless plug here, but that's essentially what it is.
It's so funny that you said that, because that's my takeaway, is to tie into the coordinated movement through one, commitment, commandment, and collaboration. So, I think the idea from Tom, who, obviously commits to, changing the world and with his capabilities, commanding the world, which means to work with it, and then to collaborate with it, which is to execute with that connection. And obviously Richard with the ESG model that is based off of commitment, commandment, and collaboration. And holistic medical centers are in the challenge and question that Dr. Anya had was, how do I get people to commit, to command, and to collaborate with the universe? And the shift in the mindset and the shift in the paradigm needs to be, what is it that's interfering or disconnecting us from oneness, and a holistic approach to financing ventures, a holistic approach to economics, and a holistic approach to health and holistic, medical concerns. So I always feel at one with you. I sit there today, and if you take little sound bites, everyone, I hope you're listening, and you're not signing up at learn.blainebartlett.com/LMN world. I mean, just the organizations that you are the leader in, an advisor in, and the knowledge base that you have, I think we cannot allow the legacy of your intelligence to not be presented. Too many people of your stature are not participating to the audience that we speak to here. And I think, I just want to point out to everyone listening on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the digital media, we need to make sure that people like Blaine Bartlett are supported, because we're going to lose some valuable dummy tax that this person is paid. And I don't want to lose that. So I appreciate you every Thursday taking your time to help bridge the gap and utilize your extreme knowledge in a new context and with all these amazing guests we have. So thank you, my friend.
My pleasure, David. And thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And I love you. I do.
I love
always.
you too.
And I get to see you again tomorrow too. This is amazing.
That's awesome.